And so don't worry about frantically drop down your notes, because if you really need it, you can actually go back and watch the recording. And if you have any friends who are interested in learning more about the NCP scholarship program, but they can't make it tonight, you can also let them know that they can watch the recording. Okay, so basically we'll start it in 1 minute. Now I can see some of our NCP scholars have actually joined the webinar, so I'm just going to change the setting to become a panelist. Okay, great. So first of all, thank you for taking your time to joining us today, and then I hope that you are coping well with your online studies this semester, and I know that you are all very busy preparing for the final assessment, so really appreciate you take the time today. And I really hope that after tonight's webinar, you will find out a lot more information about what is an NCP scholarship, what are the benefits, and if you're interested, how do you actually put in your application? So first, let's go through today's agenda. So basically, we'll talk about what is actually NCP scholarship program, what are the benefits, and what can you do with the NCP scholarship? If you're interested, what are the criteria and what are the application process, and how do you actually prepare your NCP scholarship application? And tonight we are very lucky because we have some of our successful NCP scholar actually with us tonight, so they are going to share some tips with you guys. And then finally, we'll have Q&A session in the end. So if you do have any questions, you can definitely type in your questions, and we'll wait till the end of the session to answer your questions. So first of all, I can see Erdem or James are already here, as well as Kissy. So, hi Erdem. Do you want to turn on your video and also your mic and just say hello to the attendees?
Can you guys see me?
Yes.
Hey everyone, sorry, I'm just in transit at the moment, so I'm about to leave. I'm Erdem. I'm the 2020 NCP Scholar for Taiwan. I'm studying social science, and I will be actually going there next year, around about March. My program is based on gender studies, queer studies. I'm doing some queer advocacy work and internships in Taipei next year.
Excellent, thanks Erdem. And next, Kirsty.
Hi everyone, my name is Kirsty. I'm a 2020 scholar for South Korea. So basically my program was to sort of explore urban planning in South Korea and how we can bring that back to Western Sydney. I'm an international studies and social sciences student.
Thank you, Kirsty. And next we have James.
Hi, can you hear me? Can you hear me, Joy?
A little bit, but I think the sound is not very good at the moment.
Yeah, I don't know what's happened tonight. My connection seems really poor.
Right, maybe we'll come back to you later, and then if you want to try to reconnect or your mobile and see whether or not it will be better.
Yeah, no, I'll try to fix this in the meantime.
Okay, thanks, James. Okay. So first, what is actually a New Combo Plan? So New Combo Plan is actually the Australian government's initiative to basically improve young Australians' Indo-Pacific knowledge in the region, because obviously the Australian government see this is like a strategic goal to improve young Australians' knowledge. So then, because we really consider as our very important economic power that we can basically to build Australia's future. So this short video basically explains what is the New Colombo Plan, and it slightly touched on the difference between NCP scholarship and NCP mobility grants.
The New Colombo Plan is bringing Australia closer than ever to our Indo-Pacific neighbours. The New Colombo Plan provides Australian undergraduates with a unique opportunity to live, study and work in the Indo-Pacific region. Students can opt for a long-term scholarship or a short-term mobility grant, and there are 40 countries to choose from.
The reason that I chose South Korea mainly was because it has a huge electronics engineering base there. So I went to the top technology.
Oop, don't know why it stops there. We'll play it again.
The New Colombo Plan is bringing Australia closer than ever to our Indo-Pacific neighbours. The New Colombo Plan provides Australian undergraduates with a unique opportunity to live, study and work in the Indo-Pacific region. Students can opt for a long-term scholarship or a short-term mobility grant, and there are 40 countries to choose from.
The reason that I chose South Korea mainly was because it has a huge electronics engineering base there. So I went to the top technology university in the country, if not one of the best in the world. And I actually did all of the major courses that I would have done in South Australia anyway.
One of the great unique features of the New Colombo Plan is the ability to incorporate a work experience, an internship, a mentorship, whether it be with a company or for a not-for-profit organisation, and having exposure to that work environment in our region is a great value add for Australia.
Okay, so yeah, basically the video is like a quick summary of what a New Colombo Plan scholarship is. It does touch on the NCP mobility grant. So maybe some of you have heard about NCP mobility grants before, and sometimes it's very easy for us to mix up the difference between NCP scholarship and NCP mobility grants. So basically the difference is the NCP scholarship program is an individual program. You basically apply to us and you can customize your own learning abroad program based on your own passion and your own academic discipline. So you can design, you can choose your program. You can also pick which overseas location, which overseas university that you want to study at within the 40 eligible host country. NCP Mobility Grant is a different one. You probably heard it from your school, especially School of Business, School of Education. Sometimes the school actually put in particular projects to the Australian government, and if the projects get funded, then that's how the school will basically take a study tour or like an internship overseas. But the NCP scholarship program is a longer term of program, and essentially you basically will study there in your preferred host destination for up to 1 year long. And then you can also add on a language training. So for example, let's say if you wanted to go to Japan for like a 2-semester long program, then before that, if you want to add on like a Japanese language studies while you're there, you can do that. So you can do it before you go on the program or whilst you're actually doing your semester or year-long study. And in addition to that, you can also propose an internship to an organization that you wish to work for. So for example, maybe if you want to work for UN, then you can actually propose, okay, my study program will be in Japan. That is my primary location. And then, but I also want to work with UN. So then you can propose that, you'll work with UN as your internship. Mentorship is a little bit different to internship. So you can actually have both internship and mentorship. So the difference is internship is basically like a work experience. It can be for credits or not for credits. It really depends on your academic program at Western Sydney University. With mentorship is not for academic credit bearing. Basically is you identify a mentor that they basically will guide you through your studies and also your career progression, your career aspiration. And during the early stage, when you're thinking about applying for NCP scholarship program, you don't need to have the exact details of which company that you want to do your internship or like which particular working professional you want them to be your mentor. Because once you successfully become an NCP scholar, then you will have access to this network. So your case manager can guide you through the network where you can find your internship or mentorship. So basically the whole experience can up to 19 months. Of course, if you don't want to do it that long, you can just, let's propose just 1 semester long study together with language training and internship a little bit shorter. But if you want to maximize the benefits, you can basically spend time overseas for up to 19 months. And the good thing is all these expenses is actually paid for by DFAT. And that is also one of the reasons why this scholarship is highly competitive. But we are here to help you to get you the most prestigious scholarship in Australia. And like I said before, there are 40 eligible host locations for you to choose from in the Indo-Pacific region. Right now, we're moving on to talk about the actual money benefits. So we talk about the semester or year-long study program. So the reason why I list out the tuition fee here in these slides is because you don't have to pick an overseas university that is exchange partner with Western Sydney University. So for example, if you study marine biology and then you find this amazing overseas university in Vanuatu that you want to study, you can basically study there, and then the Australian government will pay your tuition fee to that overseas university. So the tuition fee benefits is up to $10,000. So that's for basically 2 semesters. There are some universities operate in a trimester. So in that case, the amounts will be slightly different. You will also get paid a monthly stipend. So that's $2,500 monthly. So all this money that I talk about is actually in Australian dollar, okay? In addition to that, if you select that you want to do a language training, so it depends on what you're going to do. So basically the benefits can be up to $10,000. Travel allowance is basically your flights to and from, your flights basically to your host destination. That's $2,500 Australian government will pay for you, as well as the establishment allowance. So when you first move to a new country, there will be some costs. So basically they will pay for $2,500. So there is an additional $1,000 for NCP fellows, and I will talk more about what is NCP fellow later on in this webinar. In addition to that, you have a different health and travel insurance, really comprehensive, that is basically offered by DFAT, and also a dedicated case manager to support you throughout the duration of your program if you need to make any changes, okay? Then, well, you might say, oh, Juliet, that all sounds really, really good. What are the criteria for me to apply for the program? So basically, you must be Australian citizen, okay? You can, so for example, if previously you are an Indian citizen, but now you're only Australian citizen, you can propose India as your host location. So long as you don't hold dual citizenship in that host country that you propose to, then it is okay. You also need to be enrolled at Western Sydney University throughout the application process. Now, this is also very important. You need to be between 18 to 28 years old, inclusive. So on the 1st of January 2021, you need to between this age range. As I mentioned before, NCP scholarship is highly, highly competitive. So there is a GPA requirement of 4.9. So the government, basically the rules is you need to have 70% of grade point average. So when we basically translate to the Western Sydney University GPA, that will be 4.9. Now, if you are first year, first semester at Western Sydney University, and you do not have any GPA yet, but you know that you've been doing really, really well this semester, you might still be eligible, but what we need is an academic reference from your lecturer, someone from an academic who can comment on your academic excellency. Okay, now exciting part. Let's look at the available host location. So basically there are 40 eligible countries that you can choose from. I can already tell you traditionally the most popular one will always be Hong Kong, China, Japan, Korea, Singapore, Indonesia. So you can, of course, when you propose your host destination, you basically need to go with your passion, right? You are really truly passionate about a particular topics, and that is highly relevant, and you think you can learn a lot if you go to that particular country. Because what happened is each country have some quota, will be around 15 scholars, maybe maximum 20 scholars can be allocated to that country. So if you want to increase your successful rate to get the NCP scholarship, you might want to plan strategically, right? So for example, Fiji, maybe you can think about Fiji, Sri Lanka, Vanuatu, Maldives. You know how amazing would it be? Of course, you need to do some research, and you have to be comfortable regarding the country that you're going, and you need to find the unique selling point about yourself, okay? And of course, the proposed host location and the host university need to be unique in some way that is relevant to your academic program at Western Sydney University, because the study components that you do as your NCP scholarship program must be credit bearing, okay? You must receive academic credit approval from your academic course advisor. So now I'm just going to quickly talk about timeline, and then we'll get our NCP scholar basically for their inputs to talk about how did they pick their, host location and host university, and also the application process. Okay, so basically, quickly go through the timeline. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because this information is basically available on our websites. Our internal application deadline is 14th of June because, guys, you need to understand each Australian university can only nominate 10 students to DVET. So your application needs to be brilliant, need to be really, really good. You need to have very strong case why we need to pick you. So make sure you just put in your expression of interest before 14th of June. And then after that, we'll basically do an interview. And if you're successful, then we will nominate you to DVET. And then from there, you will basically started like a actual NCP scholarship application. After you completed the written application, then the governments will go through the shortlisted, and if you're successful, then you'll be invited to Canberra and attend an interview there. The final results, basically, you will find out in November. Now, I know that currently, because of coronavirus and the travel restrictions, usually right now we're applying for you guys to go next year for the NCP scholarship program. You basically have the opportunity to depart anytime between 1st of January 2021 to 15th of December 2021. So you can depart anytime during that. Basically, at the moment, it still depends on the travel restrictions. So, so that's why I don't want you to feel scared because you don't know what will happen next year, and that will stop you from putting your application. Because what happened is, if for some reason the coronavirus situation is still going on next year and the travel restrictions still not lifted, then basically you will have the opportunity to depart and start your NCP scholarship program in 2021. Okay. Now let's go through the selection criteria. So basically we kind of like mirror the Australian government's their internal written application process and their selection criteria. So then that is very important. Starting from today, you need to think about what you can write about the selection criteria. And the reason why we run this webinar is basically to share some tips with you, and hopefully that can help you to go through the application, because I can understand you know, maybe you haven't written any selection criterion before, and it might be the whole application process might be a little bit daunting. So the first one is you basically need to address your academic excellence at the tertiary level. So it is very important in regards to tertiary level, your high school achievement do not count. So you do not mention that in when you address selection criteria in this part. Your GPA or your grade on your transcript will already tell them everything. So don't waste your words to describe, oh, I have 5 HDs or I have 2 HDs, because the assessor can actually see in your transcript already. What you really, really want to highlight is your cognitive skills, your critical thinking skills. For example, maybe during your tertiary studies, you've published like a paper, or any examples that can demonstrate your academic excellence at the tertiary level, you need to mention that. Now, I actually would like to open it up and get our NCP scholar to share their tips. So, Kissy?
Yeah, for this section, with academic excellence, I think it's good to mention your GPA just say it's out of 7, even just to give the panel sort of like a quantitative amount to sort of see what your academic excellence is like. If you have any awards that you've received, if you become a tutor, like a past facilitator at uni, for example, that's something that you could add. If you're a member of the academy, that's another thing that you could add. Basically anything that is sort of has a sort of academic requirement to attain, you should mention it in this section for sure.
Great. Erdem?
I agree with Kirsty. There's not much else that I can say apart to that. But yeah, anything that you can think of, anything that is academic related, mention it. And also, yes, I agree with the GPA, because different universities have got different ways of what's it called, quantifying GPA as well. So out of 7 is Western Sydney's Innerfield University. So I agree with her.
Great. Thanks, Erdem. And James?
Can you hear me better now?
Yes, much better. And then maybe you can also take this time to introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. I'll start with introducing myself, everyone. So I was for Nepal. So I chose to do my 1 semester in Nepal. Oh, sorry, 2. One was because I'm doing social science. It was already a mandatory final semester placement to go to Nepal. So it was going to be 2 there and a year of internships, hopefully in Japan. That's still on the cards. In regards to this, yeah, completely agree with Kirsty and Erdem. Just make sure that you say that it's out of 7. So I would write, for example, 6.5 out of 7. And yeah, don't stress your grades, but I would write predominantly high distinctions on distinctions, averaging. That's about it. But yeah, no, I think exactly what you're saying. They've got the transcript, so they know.
Great, thank you. Thanks, James. Okay, so next is basically you need to talk about your leadership and engagement in the community. So for example, if you are, let's say, a president of this society or clubs, or at Western Sydney University. So basically, this selection criteria, it can be something within the university community, but it can also be something that you've been doing in your local community, both locally or also overseas. So anything that you can demonstrate your leadership skill and engagement. Don't mention things like, "Oh, I previously participated in this campaign," but if you mention your participation as more like a participant, it won't be seen as so valuable by the assessors, because they actually want to see what are the initiatives that you actually initiate and you actually create, and how did you lead your community. So what I'll do again, I'll do the same. So if Kirsty, Erdem and James, you can share some of the tips of what you have written, maybe then it will just share some lights to the other students what they can write for this part.
Yeah, so I'll go first. With leadership and engagement, I was quite involved in university, so I talked about quite a few examples, but I did have some that I have leadership experiences of in overseas opportunities. So before NCP, I did a few other international experiences, and I mentioned that if you have them, definitely add them in and talk about it. But I think the key thing here for this criteria is actually quality over quantity. So not to mention like just don't name drop basically the things that you've done. If you can just talk deeply about a few of the things and select the ones that like you can talk about a lot more, especially in the interview when you can expand on it. I definitely recommend that for this section for sure.
That's great. Thanks, Kirsty. Erdem?
Yep, sure. So I'll speak about what I actually did. So at the moment, I am the president of the Queer Collective, and I'm also on the SRC as the queer representative. So I spoke about those 2 things because in those positions, I am kind of at the highest level of leadership in those positions. But apart from that, I also mentioned the fact that I'm a dance teacher, and I spoke about how I use, my dance teaching to lead, like, multiple kids at a time, like 40, 50 kids. And that was actually what I spoke about the most in my final application, because that's how I could demonstrate the most amount of leadership. Because I guess in my roles, I don't do much, in my role at university, I don't do too much leadership in the way of actually making people do things. So that was where I expanded upon. I spoke about how I got these kids through to Australia's Got Talent and this and that. So yeah, I think if you can like find any kind of relevant source in your life, expand upon that. And also try as quickly as you can to get into these positions now, while you're before you have to get to the final application.
That's good tips. Thanks, Erdem. James?
Yeah, again, it's hard going last. You both say everything that I wanted to say, but I think considering you only have, is it 200-300 words, Juliet?
Yes.
On each section?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was always told to kind of approach it like you would like in an essay, each paragraph. You're not going to fill a paragraph with different topics, like several different topics, and just try and jam as much as you can in. Try and have a theme for that paragraph essentially, and how they all there's a bigger picture. So with my one, I remember showing you, Juliet, I had like all these different things for like swim teacher, working in a jail, playing football, but it all didn't go together in one kind of nice story. So I kind of made my main point working with Indigenous people in the jails, in football, teaching them how to swim and things like that. So I think it's important just to have a neat package, having it all together. A story, not telling several stories, you're telling one story and several different factors. Yeah.
Definitely. I think that's a good point that James touched on. And I'll definitely get you guys to talk more about how do you basically come up with the host destination and your whole story that is basically throughout the entire application. So then the assessors will know you as a person, what is the story behind you. Because guys, selection, because the Australian government definitely want to basically select a very diverse range of really bright Australians undergraduate students to go. So they definitely want to see diversity. So if you have an interesting story to tell and can show your passion, who you really are, then you will have a higher chance to be in the game. Okay. So the next one is actually adaptability and resilience. This is very important, and I think all our current NCP scholar can actually can tell that, because for Kirsty and James, they actually already left Australia and they went to Korea and Nepal, but when the COVID-19 started, they basically need to frantically and quickly organize flights to return home. And we're just back to the lifestyle here in Australia. So because when you think about the dollar value, the Australian government is investing up to 60K for each scholar to go overseas. So it is very important for them to know this investment will be great for you individually as well to the Australian community. So if the applicants cannot demonstrate that they are highly adaptable and resilient, they're worried that what happens if you go to a host country for so long, then there's so many challenges, so many different changes, then the scholar won't be able to cope with that. So that's why it is one of the important selection criteria is how you can demonstrate your ability to adapt to change in the face of challenges. And look, this one, it doesn't need to be like a case that you've experienced overseas. You can even talk about growing up, any challenges that you experience either in terms of the family situation or your academic environments locally as well. So you just need to think about a very strong case that show your past behavior, that you can be very adapted to challenging environments. Okay, this time I will let James talk first. James.
Thanks, Juliet. So with this one, I remember when I did this seminar last year, Nikki, who did it, made a good point. She said that they like a sob story. You know, just it doesn't sounds. I don't know the word, but they do like watch every kind of reality show. There's always a sob story. Every singing competition, they like to hear the sob story rather than the actual effort. And I think a good way to approach this is don't be modest. Tell your story. Tell it. Let other people tell you, perhaps, because it might be something you are quite modest about. And you know, things like growing up in housing commission, growing up with a single parent, or going overseas. These are something. If you haven't been overseas, those are some go-tos. Working and studying full time. You'd be surprised how resilient you are, and how much they will react to this.
That's right. Thanks, James. I think that's really great encouragement. And from that, I think, Erdem, you have something to say that, you know, before that you're not sure whether or not you're good enough to put in the application?
Yeah, so basically, I'll say first of all, I agree with James as well. You got to understand that what you're doing is you're competing with every other student who's applying for this. So it is a competition. You do need to, you know, expand. You do need to like kind of really explain what things you've been through. You need to kind of leverage your position and what's happened to you. So, you know, also know that this is like a private thing. When you send this off, it's not seen by other students or anything. So you can really like expand and talk about your experiences and whatnot. Even if you haven't gone through any hardships, you can still speak about things that have, you know, that you happened for your life, or having to go through like intense organization or time management skills that you have. What Juliet was mentioning was that when I was actually putting through my application, when I got through to the round when I actually had to submit to the NCP, I was going to not do it because I didn't think that my personal application was good enough. I'm just a social science student. I know that lots of people who are doing this are economics or business or, you know, international relations, and I didn't have any of that. And I just, all I do, I guess, in my brain was that I do queer advocacy. I didn't think that was good enough. So I wasn't going to go through with it, but I ended up doing it just anyways. And I got it. And so they do want a diverse bunch of people, really, 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 truly. So yeah, I'd say go for it. Think about what you're going to write in there. Just and go through till the end, you know?
Thanks, Erdem. Kirsty?
Yeah, definitely really great points that James and Erdem spoke about. I think one thing that I'd want to say is that don't be afraid to get personal. So just telling you guys what I wrote in this criteria, I personally talked about some identity struggles that I've gone through as like a modern Muslim Australian woman and getting sort of misidentified as an Australian, and all of the struggles that I had, like wanting to exemplify what an Australian means. So I added that. I also know people who added that they were previous alcoholic and things like that. So you don't need to like be afraid of getting really personal. They actually love that, because then you can actually expand on that when you speak to them on the interview and talk about it in a more real sense, and they'll see the passion behind that for sure.
That's great. Thank you, Kirsty. Okay, so the final objective, and this one is also very important, and usually this is the part that applicants usually struggle the most, is actually have a true understanding of what are the actual NCP goals and objectives, and how you and your proposed scholarship program can contribute to the goals. So, and that is the reason why before you put in your application, I will highly, highly encourage you to take some time to read through the NCP, the NCP webpage, and then to understand what are the reasons behind the Australian government to actually launch this NCP scheme. Why is it so important to the Australian government to send 10,000, now we have up to 40,000 alumni, NCP alumni in the Indo-Pacific region. So really have a true understanding why the Australian governments are doing this, and how your story and your proposed destination, your entire scholarship program can contribute to the goals, not for just personal gain, but also to the greater society and the community and the Australian economy is also really, really important. So to that, I will, maybe this time I'll get Erdem to talk first. Erdem.
Yep, sure. So look, so basically, I'll speak about what I wrote about. Okay, so you know, this was definitely the hardest part for me, because this is not about what you've done. It's about what you can give to the NCP and why they should be picking you. And if you don't have a real narrative as to why you're applying, then it's going to be a hard task. But basically, I spoke about how, you know, in my role in Western Sydney, I deal with queer students, and I know a Western sense of what it's like to be LGBTIQ. So I understand the space, you know, from a kind of a Catholic, Muslim, Christian, religious perspective, because I've been around those people. And I understand the perspective of what it's like in this country with these laws, but I wanted to understand what it was like to be queer in an Eastern setting, right? So, you know, in somewhere in the Indo-Pacific. So I chose Taiwan. I also linked that in because Taiwan was the first country in Asia to legalize same-sex marriage. So tied in the fact that I want to learn about what it's like to be queer in an Eastern perspective, and that's what my whole application was about. Basically, I wrote most of that in my application, and then I tied that all in at the end, and that's what I did personally.
That's great. Thanks, Erdem. James?
Yeah, so Erdem just reminded me what I wrote for my one. It is the most difficult one, and I remember being quite confused with it, because I know there's two sets of, and there's like the objectives, and then there's the other ones. Do you remember that, Juliet? There's like two sets, and one's the objectives and one's something else, and I was always told just to appeal to, I don't know, all of them, but I remember, just like Erdem said, like, I think this is a chance to kind of show your knowledge of your region a little bit. So like when I chose Nepal, I was trying to, again, link it with my whole story, my background in sport and whatnot, and saying like how Nepal and Australia have what they have in common with soccer, like their love of football and cricket, how they hadn't won, I think a medal at the Olympics. So I was just trying to like suggest programs where they could collaborate on common ground, and how in Australia, most Nepalis work in like kitchens and like fast food and cleaning mostly. And I was just trying to say through the NCP, I would like to promote that more Nepalis come here, but expand their avenues to come here, not just having to work at McDonald's when they come here and live in certain enclaves. It was more, maybe we could do some kind of exchange through sport, through cricket, through different avenues. But I think this is a chance to show off what you know about the country and what you can contribute to it.
Definitely. I think that's a very good point. You can't, like when you mention, when you propose a host country, you can't just simply say, oh, I really enjoy their culture and their food and I've always want to go there, because that doesn't cut it, because it's not a holiday the governments pay for it. They actually really want to see the bigger goal, the bigger picture. After you return from the program, how are you going to contribute to the community? So Kissy.
Yeah, so basically what James said about showing off like what you know about the country that you want to choose as your host location is really key in this criteria. So I think the biggest advice I would say is be as specific as possible. So because I'm in urban planning, and my whole story was like how Western Sydney is developing at the moment, and Korea has some really great initiatives and how I can bring that back to our region. So from there, I actually identified that like Parramatta City Council, for example, their sister city is in Seoul, South Korea. So I brought that link and just brought like how I would want to directly contribute to a more of a direct way. And I also, in this section, mentioned how I was already an NCP alumni before, being on a short-term grant before, and how I'm well connected in like, I guess, other NCP sort of initiatives that other alumni started. So I mentioned like just some initiatives there, what my involvement is, and basically you just needed to sort of convince the panel that you already have all the steps and all the research that you've done completed, and all you need is this scholarship to get you there. So I think that's a huge thing that you should probably talk about in this section. Sure.
That's great, thank you. Okay, so now it's like questions time for our NCP scholars. So what made you first think about, you know, becoming NCP scholar or actually put in the actual application? Who want to talk first? Maybe Erdem?
Sure. Well, look, so at the start of this NCP program, I had no idea what I was doing, and I didn't even know what it was or if I even wanted to go through with it. It wasn't like I knew about it from the start. I just kind of saw this opportunity, and I thought this is a great opportunity. You know, the rewards are much greater than the risk. The risk is like, you know, maybe you fail and whatever. So I just thought I might as well just go through with it. And yeah, like I don't know, it's a great program, and there's definitely a lot of rewards involved. So I don't think it's too much of a tough decision.
Definitely. James?
Yeah, sorry, my sound sort of. I had no idea about it as well. I know maybe Kirsty knew a little bit about it, working with you there, but I think I had a meeting with you, Juliet, because I had applied for a smaller grant, NCP grant. I didn't know what they were. I was just applying. I just wanted to travel. I really just wanted to travel. I hadn't done much travel younger. So I came to uni really late. I was about 25, I think, when I came to uni. So, and I just been working. So I wanted a chance just to travel a lot during my uni, the short time I was doing a bachelor's degree, and I don't know, make up for lost time. And it was really just by chance. I think I was just flicking through one day, and I think I had a meeting with Juliet, and she mentioned it, and I didn't think anything of it. And then months later, I got an email just to apply. So yeah, I don't know. I really don't know, but it's something, yeah, you'll never regret doing.
That's great. Thanks, James. I think it's very normal because the NCP scholarship program is still quite new and not a lot of people are aware of that. And that's the reason why we really want, you know, a lot of students to aware of that and actually put in the application, regardless of like what is the original reason that you want to put in the application. Kirsty, you already know about that. But then can you talk about some of the barriers that you face when you maybe talk about, you know, how did you pick your host university, host location? I think that will be some of the questions some of the students might have in mind at the moment.
Yeah, sure. So for me, well, NCP was actually a scholarship that I wanted to get for a very long time. So it was a no-brainer for me to apply for it, but also I already sort of decided what country I wanted to go to from the beginning, because, well, why I chose South Korea was, firstly, I have a personal connection to South Korea. I was a very K-pop fanatic when I was in high school. So there was that aspect, but also I had a lot of friends in high school that were like Korean, Australian, migrants as well. So I grew up around that culture. I already knew the language despite like a little bit, not that much, but a little bit, despite not having any classes and things like that. And also just in terms of how that lined up with my career goals and what I wanted to do, it just seemed like the perfect choice. So I think in terms of choosing your selecting the host country and the host university, the first step would be firstly to reflect on, I guess, what you want to do out of your career and things like that, what your passions are. And then from there, just a little bit of like a Google search on like what universities or what countries in the Asia Pacific are, you know, doing really well and are doing, you know, really amazing stuff in your field. So for example, with South Korea, they have heaps of smart city stuff that is really interesting. So I chose that as well. And also, if you want to look at host universities, that's actually quite tricky. But we can, like the Go Global team can definitely help with you identifying them. But essentially what I did was I Googled top universities, urban planning, Asia, and it came up. So literally, if you just want to like Google that. It's definitely an option for you to do. Some barriers that I faced was honestly like juggling time for the application. It was really like all the deadlines and stuff, and I'm very notorious for leaving things last minute, so please don't be like me. But some of the other barriers was, I guess, trying to figure out what I should and shouldn't mention, and what sort of, all of the experiences that I've had, what sort of linked up to create that whole story, as we've mentioned before. Another tip that I would have would be to literally, once you have your applications in the selection criteria, try to get as many people as you can to read it and to get feedback on, whether that's friends, family, academics, or even like previous NCP scholars. Like, I'm more than happy to read your applications if you want to contact me. Then yeah, that would be the next best thing for sure.
Excellent. So James, what about you? Do you have any tips for the people who are actually thinking to apply for the NCP scholarship? How should they go in terms of like selecting their host country or host university?
Yeah, I think one of the perks I had was being bit older as an app. So I didn't whole thing. I just thought of it as something, if it happens, it happens. So my advice was just, as I've been saying throughout, you're telling a story. You can't really fake that. And I think the country you choose, I know it'd be great to go to certain areas. But I think you really should have a story and an affinity with that location. Just like Kirsty was saying, it could be something just like you were passionate about the culture growing up. You did a class, you did a language, you studied that language in high school. It's just something. Yeah, my advice really is just don't take it seriously. It's because it really is life changing. But I just think the way I approached it was like writing a very precise essay. Like, it was just very clear. I would kind of recite it and just but it wasn't hard in the sense that it was my life. I was just telling my story, but I was just polishing my story, really. Not to say I didn't spend a lot of time on it, but I just think they can tell if you're lying. You've got to just be honest with your story and know your story.
Definitely. I think even go through the entire application process is kind of like a self-discovery, and also is like very helpful to go through the written application and also all the interview stages. Speaking of that, Erdem, do you want to talk about your interview and also your written application with the NCP panelists?
Sure, yeah, but if I could quickly just go back to your last question,
Sure.
because so I actually, firstly, when I applied, I didn't know where I wanted to go at all, and I just picked out of nowhere Vietnam. I didn't have a reason to go there. I just chose Vietnam. I thought, cool, should be easy to get into because it's not a popular country to choose. And then after that, after doing more research, when I got through the Western Sydney rounds of application and interview, I did some more research and I reapplied with Taiwan. And the reason I applied with Taiwan is because it had more relevance to what I was wanting to do. Right, so I think you need to find as much link to the country you're applying to as you can. You don't worry about too much about the university. I wouldn't say that. I'd say find a link to the country so you can actually get there. So that's what I focused on mainly. To your next question, basically, yeah. So after the university's 2 applications, you have to redo a written application, send that off, and then you have your final interview. I actually wasn't in Australia for my final interview. Normally, what happens is it's a very daunting process where Christy can talk more about this, but you actually get flown to Canberra and you have to you get interviewed in front of a panel in Canberra. I think at Parliament House. I'm not sure. Was that right, Christy?
It's not at Parliament House. It's actually at a hotel. But yeah, it's like 6 people on the panel. It's a little bit daunting, but it's not too bad.
Okay. Yeah, so I didn't have that because I was already on overseas exchange in Spain, and so I had an online interview, which was still very nerve-wracking. But yeah, basically, you're there, and there's there's people looking at you, 3-4 people in a panel, and they ask you questions related to your application. And you know, mostly if you know your application through and through, then you'll be able to answer it quite easily. But then they'll ask you questions that are related to things you've mentioned, like something you've mentioned about in your what's it called, in your
Application.
in application. And one of the sections with like the things that happen in your life or some of your academic progress or whatever, they'll expand upon these things. So then you have to be ready to answer properly, but yeah, I think Kirsty can talk to you more about the actual in-person interview, sorry.
That's right. So Kirsty and James, do you want to elaborate on the entire process and what kind of, yeah, like what James said, is that you mentally prepare for that. Don't take it seriously, but still take it seriously enough to not feel overwhelmed by the entire experience, but basically be your true self and tell your stories and have a story, like a theme about your application.
So, okay, I'll go first. So with the entire process, for me, the interview stage was probably the most daunting. I wouldn't say difficult, but it was just, I guess, knowing that you have like 6 people in the panel who are like really, big in the industry, and they're looking at you and you have to talk about it. And it's a little bit daunting, but, I think for me, the most reassuring thing is actually knowing yourself and knowing the program that you're proposing inside out. It's not mentioned here in this webinar, but there's also a section in the written application if you're submitted as a nominee for a program proposal, which is about 500 words. So it's actually longer than the criteria. And that section you also need to know quite well, and they kind of ask you about it in the interview too. I'm the kind of person who I can wing things, but I also want practice. So I did as many mocks as I could with people. I tried to sort of plan what kind of questions they could ask me and prepare myself for them, not like write them out and memorize them word for word, because that doesn't sound authentic at all. But yeah, I think the interview is a bit daunting, but I think the Go Global team and also even the West Sydney Careers team actually can give you mock interviews too. So definitely the university will help you prepare for it for sure.
Thanks, Kirsty. James?
Yeah, definitely agree with what Kirsty was saying. The interview would probably be the harder aspect of it. It's just about kind of making your application as good as possible and essentially just memorizing it from there and doing those mock interviews, doing as many as you can. I did one with you, Juliet. I did one with the careers advisor, Alice, and
yep.
I did it with just family. I was just doing it. And by the time I got to the interview, of course, I wasn't really nervous, but when you kind of go into interview, the first few sentences you have sound a bit shaky, and it made me feel like, but maybe they couldn't even sense I was, but it was just, I had it kind of memorized to a degree. It wasn't easy by any means, but I just think if preparation is key, and hey, maybe you can wing it. I don't know, Kirsty, maybe you did, but I think you can. I think you can, if you're honest. I was always worried that whenever I was writing my story, who's fact checking this? Because I was thinking, couldn't anyone just write they were an international model in Japan and then they're saying this and all that? And I was like, who's gonna look it up? So that was a big part of going back to you've got to sell yourself. You really got to sell yourself, because maybe take that into account. People might be, embellishing 10% maybe of what they're saying, like making it look so much better than what it was, because it would look great on paper. A lot of the things you might not write, but it would look awesome on paper. And so I really think you've got to sell yourself. You've got to stand out, because it's a huge scholarship, and I wouldn't be surprised what others might do to get it.
Definitely. So definitely do your best to put in your application. So definitely, at this stage, I think because it's all internal, so I think the things that I want those of you who are attending this webinar, listening to the webinar, to essentially think about, you know, roughly which host country that you want to go. You don't need to have the exact plan for the host university just yet, because you're just going through the internal round, and then also think about your story, and then also how to address those selection criteria, and also really read the NCP scholarship application guideline, because after you actually get selected, then things get really serious. Then we really need to think about your academic plan, you know, what you are going to study, and or including seeking academic approval from your academic course advisor for your proposed study plan. You know, getting a criminal record check, things like that. And also to, like what Kirsty mentioned earlier, to write actually a proposed program, 500 words, what you're going to do, think about the internship, and also the potential mentorship, and also language training. Okay, so next we're going to play this video. So she's actually an NCP Scholar alumni. Her name is Lashmi. The reason why I want to play this video is because Lashmi already completed her NCP scholarship program, and it'll be interested for you guys to know what she's up to right now. Well, this video was taken last year.
I'm Lakshmi Logavasan. I was a part of the 2015 New Colombo Plan Scholarship Program, and I currently work with the New South Wales Government in their graduate program, currently rotating in the Ministry of Health. The New Colombo Plan Scholarship Program has opened up incredible opportunities for me. I'm a first generation Australian Sri Lankan Tamil. I live in Western Sydney and I grew up in Western Sydney, and the scholarship program has opened so many opportunities educationally and professionally that I probably otherwise wouldn't have had. Studying at the National University of Singapore and taking public policy subjects, sitting down with a classroom full of students across the region and discussing public policy issues has had a profound impact on my career trajectory and the way that I view how countries plan their future. And that has led to my current job here in New South Wales Government in public policy. During my time in Singapore, I made some incredible connections with peers at university and also my peers during my internship, and many of my friends have gone on to work in government. We have very strong passions about public policy and the shaping the future of our country and our region, and I think that bodes incredibly well for Australia and also our region.
Okay, so yeah, so you know, Lakshmi actually mentioned the benefits about attending the NCP scholarship program, and you know, you do get immersed in the host country for very significant amounts of time, and James kind of like touched on a little bit earlier. So you can propose your primary location, and then also propose a secondary location. So for example, you can propose that you want to go to maybe Vanuatu for a semester-long studies plus an internship, and then you can propose another internship in another location, in the secondary location. So that's definitely possible. So now let's see if we have any questions. So if you have any questions, you can type in the Q&A part, and then we'll answer them now. Okay, so a questions that we can see now is, if you are a second year students, is it your GPA from your best semester thus far or your current semester? So will be your GPA till now. So not just the previous semester or your current semester, or you cannot select your best semester. It will be just, you know, all the studies that you completed so far and your GPA. Okay. For a first year students, do I get an email from my tutor recommending me, or how do I go about proving myself eligible. Yep. So if you're first semester student and you do not have any GPA, what we'll do is in the initial stage, basically, we'll need like an academic reference from your tutor or lecturer. So that is the internal application, just so they can comment on, your academic achievements. When you actually get to the nomination stage to DFAT, then that is actual academic reference that your academic will need to fill it out for you just to comment on that. The next question is, how do you decide a university in the selected country? So I think Kirsty actually touched on that earlier. So basically, the ideal situation is for you to actually think about a country that you would like to go. I'll recommend you to actually go through all the 40 eligible host location. I will highly recommend you to think outside of the boxes, not just to go for the traditional popular locations to increase your chance to get a place. Once you identify the selected country, then you can use awesome Google search skills, and like Kissy mentioned, top university in this area in that country or in Asia or in Indo-Pacific, and see what it comes up. And also the other good thing is it also will be really good to talk to your academics, because sometimes your academics, they might already have some research collaboration. They will know some of their colleagues were in other universities that might not be exchange partner with Western Sydney University, but they will know their academic strengths quite well. So I think it would be worth to actually talk to a very trusted academic that you're very close with, and then see if they have any connection that they can recommend. Okay. Another question is there any cover in the cost for housing or accommodation? So who wants to answer that? Maybe James?
Which one was it? Sorry, Kirsty? I'm sorry.
Is there any cover in the cost of housing or accommodation?
Well, it just comes your stipend. So you get the 2,500. So that covers everything. And yeah, it depends on I was in Nepal, so 2,500 a month goes a long way. Kirsty, how did that go in Korea?
Yeah, so obviously it's you get the 2,500 per month, and it's up to you to sort of ration that out and budget. In South Korea, 2.5 isn't that much, but you can get by. There's also options for you to get housing on campus, so at the university that you're studying at. You can stay on campus, which is generally a lot cheaper depending on where you go. But I actually, with my 1 month that I stayed there, I actually opted to do my own studio apartment, which you're not limited and you're not restricted to do that. You can definitely also use that money to pay for housing and accommodation. And also the next question with Pearl, it said that would we organize it independently or with the same host location meant to be students or another way? You definitely are encouraged to organize it independently, but again, there is on-campus accommodations. You can stay with a family member. There's not really any restrictions, but again, the case manager would be the best contact for that, for sure.
That's right. So it's interesting that Kirsty and James touched upon the cost of living in the host country. So maybe this is also something you would like to think about is, $2,500 might not go very far in Japan, Korea, or Hong Kong, and Singapore. But it will go really far if you go to Nepal, India, Sri Lanka. So then maybe that is also something you can think about in terms of how that may be one of the factors that you want to consider when deciding which country that you want to go. Because I remember one of our NCP scholar, Nikki, so she went to Indonesia for the first semester, and then the second the second part of her scholarship program, she went to Singapore, then she can really feel the difference. So this is definitely something that you will want to think about. Okay, the next question is there any leniency for COVID-19? For example, we can't be fully engaged in the community. Unfortunately, there won't be, but you can definitely talk about your past experience, you know, your previous engagement in the community, or also even during COVID-19, you can still engage with the community virtually. Okay.
Can I add to that, Juliet? Sorry.
Sorry, yes, Erdem?
I just wanted to add to that. I was going to say,
Yeah.
for everyone who's listening as well, you should really try and get engaged to Western Sydney's student voice, student kind of collective leadership, because at the moment there isn't that much, you know, I guess, things happening, and you can just come in and you can create that. You know, like there's so much space for you as a student, especially at Western Sydney. So if you want to get some stuff under your belt, really just dive head first, and within 6 months you'll be doing something. You know, you'll be involved in something, and you'll have like a bunch of events or things that you've been involved in under your belt that you can refer to.
That's right. I think Erdem actually raised a good point. Actually, a lot of students right now probably need help, and then, you know, there's also international students who are stranded, who are actually in Australia, and then they probably worry about their family back home. So maybe you can create an initiative to actually connect the international students community here, you know, in Western Sydney region or in your local community. Okay, so the next question is, what do you consider the popular destinations for the program? Okay, so typically the popular destination, or the destinations most applicants will apply for among other Australian university, I would say definitely Japan, Korea, Singapore, Hong Kong, China, Indonesia. Some years it will get popular. Yeah, so those are definitely the most traditional popular destination. Yeah.
Can I add to that, Juliet?
Yes.
I know you were mentioning how I nominated a second location. I actually didn't on my application. It was something I added. It's not like when in regards to accommodation, all these different things, your case manager is so good. Like your case manager just, you can ask them anything. They'll get back to you pretty quick, or within hours. Mine did, and they just organize, like if you put the effort in, but they'll give you all the information you need. And like I said, I applied for Nepal, but I simply asked, hey, can I go to Japan next year? And he was just like, yeah, 100%, all good. Just you organize it and I'll tick all the boxes for you. So my advice would be, maybe don't, maybe you know better than I would, Juliet, but I was always told they like, if you have a plan, if your plan's kind of scattered across several different countries, maybe it doesn't look as good. I said Nepal is my story. This is where I'm going. This is everything revolves around Nepal. But that was a year in Nepal. It was supposed to be. It gave me another 9 months then to go to Japan. So if you have your heart set on a location like Japan or Korea, where a lot of people want to go, maybe just put that on the. You can. There's always going. I think there's always going to be an opportunity to go there down the track to do an internship, to do something. So yeah, it's a
Definitely. I think in general, the case managers are very helpful, and there's definitely flexibility that your original proposed program doesn't need to be the exact program, because sometimes it could be the academic courses doesn't work out. So for example, you planned that those are the subjects that you're going to study there, and for some reason on that particular semester they don't actually offer 1 or 2 subjects, and all of a sudden you might need to change to a different location. So there's always flexibility for you to change. Let's say, for example, last year, because of the social unrest in Hong Kong, and then there's also the NCP scholars have to change to a different host location. So there's definitely flexibility. So I definitely, I think James is right. Probably in your initial application, just suggest 1 location, because priority will always be given to people who's proposed a longer kind of like plan a longer scholarship program in one single location, because they consider it as you really immerse yourself and deepen your knowledge and relationship with people and business and, you know, linkage in that particular region. Yeah, so I think that kind of answered Alana's questions. If we choose a host country where English is not a main language, do we need to choose a university that delivers courses in English? Yes, definitely. Unless if you also speak the local language fluently, then of course you don't have to take the classes in English. But otherwise, yeah, that's also part of the research that you will do, is to, okay, they do offer the courses in my academic area, but are those courses actually available in English? You'll be surprised actually how many, you know, courses are actually available in English in the Indo-Pacific region. Okay, I think we still have two or three more questions. Is it beneficial if we have studied the language of the host country? Yes, I think so, because it actually demonstrates that you have shown interest in, you know, in the culture and the language of the host country. So it is beneficial, but it's not required.
Can I add to that, Juliet?
Yes.
So with that question, you definitely don't have to have studied it, but definitely shows that you have demonstrated passion to study it. So I just, as an example, out of the 15 Korean scholars, only 2 of us had official standard, like official study of the language beforehand. So definitely not a barrier, as long as you just show that you want to and intend to study it, then for sure.
Yep. That's great. Thanks, Kissy. The next one, at the finalization of the selection process of candidates, if, for example, the person that does the interview in Canberra rejects their offer for some reason, does that mean that Western Sydney can add in one more person to the 9 finalists of Western Sydney University? Unfortunately not. So the process is we can only nominate 10 best students. And then from there, they need to complete the written application. Not every single student that completed the written application will be invited for an interview in Canberra. And then that is basically the final stage of the application process. So we only have 10 quotas. Yeah. The next one, do we have to apply to study at a top university? Well, you don't have to. It's basically definitely a personal choice. Which university that you would like to study is completely up to you. Which university that you would like to select. So you can select a university that is exchange partner at Western Sydney University, and you can also select a university that you always want to go. Okay. The next one, what if there are no university that offer my course of study? Screen media, media production. No, screen media, media production, there's a plenty of university actually offer that study. You'll be surprised. Just on top of my head, I think Hong Kong and Korea, Singapore, they're actually really good in terms of screen media and media production. So I'm sure if you do some research, you will find, you're actually surprised how many university in Indo-Pacific region actually offer courses in English in a very wide range of courses available in English. Okay, I think that's pretty much the end. I just want to invite the scholars. Do you have any final message that you want to say to the attendees?
Can I go first? Yeah, so basically, one thing that I was saying earlier to Julia is that, like, in terms of how many people applied and got through from the university round, it was like, I think more than 40 people applied, and then 10 were chosen, and then through those 10, we had to go through and do the applications again. And by the end of it, 5 people had left, had stopped with the application and dropped out. But out of the last 5 of us, 4 of us got chosen. That's an 80% success rate. So I'd recommend that even if you're struggling or if you're getting worried, like I was, continue it. Just do it. Just get through it, you know? And if you really feel like, you know, you don't have so much of a solid application, then I would say just choose a country that isn't as popular and just see what you can do, you know, give it a go. Because this year Thailand only had one scholar, and that scholar automatically became the NCP fellow. So that's one scholar. So even if you had a moderately okay application, you probably would have gotten into Thailand too for 2020.
Definitely. I think it's good that Erdem mentioned the fellow, and I did promise you that I will talk about this. So basically, NCP fellow, you do get additional $1,000. So basically, an NCP fellow is basically just ranked by their academic achievement. So it's just their GPA. So among all the NCP scholars for that particular country, they will just give the NCP fellow to the person that has the highest GPA. So if there's only one person apply for Cook's Island or New Caledonia, then automatically that person become NCP fellow. Okay.
Sorry, I just wanted to talk about the NCP fellow thing. It's actually, the criteria has changed a bit. It's not so much the GPA now, it's actually like the all-rounded, I guess, contribution that you have. So the panel on your interview day will select who the fellow will be, which will be announced when you actually have the ceremony.
That's good. I'm glad that Kirsty is on top of that, because the changes, they did change some of the criteria this year compared to last year. For example, maybe that actually showed that why this year the academic excellency, the weighting is lower than the previous year. Now they put higher weighting on how do you articulate the NCP objectives and also demonstrate the adaptability and resilience. Okay, I think that's pretty much, did we answer all the questions? I think that is pretty much okay. I just saw a few more questions. How many Western Sydney University were successful last year in receiving NCP scholarship? So we have 4. We have another student, her name is Ah, so she's also NCP scholar for Taiwan. Does the university you choose have an application process as well? Or does the scholarship give us free range to choose any university in the country? Yes, so the university that you choose also have application process. Basically at the initial stage when you actually need to put in your NCP scholarship application to DFAT, you basically need to demonstrate that you already started communicate with your proposed host university regarding the application process. Okay, final questions. Can I still apply for the scholarship if I change uni courses between rounds of applications? You can, but you just need to make sure you still enroll, and also your proposed study program doesn't change that much, because I remember one of our NCP scholar, she just changed course. So it is definitely still possible, but her degree at the is more kind of like flexible. So it really depends on your degree requirements, but it is possible. You can still apply for the scholarship even if you're in the middle of changing uni degree. Okay, thank you so much for attending the session. And then thank you so much for our NCP scholar and also my colleague Vanessa. She's monitoring the Q&A session and also to the recording. She's our social media guru behind the scene. So thank you, Vanessa, and thank you everyone for joining. I really hope to see your application. And again, if you do have any questions, you're more than welcome to book in a consultation, and you can also email goglobal@westernsydney.edu.au, and we are here to help. And believe in yourself and just put in your application. Thank you. We'll stop the recording now. Thank you.